Picture this. A miracle fluid, seemingly no drawbacks found in a described paradise. Sounds legit, right? Bioshock is a game directed by Ken Levine centered around the underwater city of Rapture. Rapture was spearheaded in the 1940s by one Andrew Ryan in an attempt to create an objective utopia. A fellow named Frank Fontaine shows up and starts a major smuggling ring to fund his eventual near takeover, which would place his namesake around a lot of the areas of Rapture, and later allow the production of Adam to fall into his hands. Adam sounds like magic. It's a substance found in the type sea slug that can alter the DNA of any individual, fixing wounds, improving skills, even granting mystical powers. The human becomes a clay model with a character sheet in the hands of Adam. This Adam, however, is very easy to overdose on, and very alluring as well, as we see in every enemy showcased as these almost zombie-like individuals, all because of Adam. This power also drives people to insanity, as seen through a lot of the game's most prominent figures, such as the mad cosmetic surgeon J.S. Steinman, or the violently poetic Sander Cohen. Generally, this game has a big focus on perfectionism, as many of the characters you meet along the way, as well as Rapture itself as an idea, surround themselves in a need to be perfect. We see these themes of perfectionism amongst an early character, J.S. Steinman. Steinman is a cosmetic surgeon and often found his job boring up on the surface, which is why he came to Rapture. He wanted more than simple facelifts and nose jobs. He wanted to make art with his work. This drive would lead Steinman to insanity, creating the need to make true beauty through cosmetics, something no human could ever accomplish. But with Adam, the face becomes a canvas, a scalpel no different than a brush. His insanity would lead him to envision Aphrodite, coercing him into believing whatever mad idea could drive a human closer to true cosmetic beauty. The player encounters Steinman, and we see him ranting about his failure, murdering a victim through his endless pursuit of perfection, and upon seeing the player, opening fire on what to him is an imperfect, ugly being. This constant need for a perfect vessel ends up being Steinman's end, as the insane reaction to the player being spotted leads the player defeating the mad doctor, never to complete his life's work. However, Steinman is far from the last perfection-seeking scoundrel about. Sander Cohen in the Fleet Hall also finds himself focusing on a perfect piece. This time, however, Cohen is an artist by string rather than scalpel, as he is a man of theater. He makes a big deal about his display, and just from the way he speaks showcases his need for grandioseness. But with this need comes a need for a legacy, a piece so powerful, so beautiful, so perfect, that generations to come would regale the tale of Sander Cohen as the best to live. As for his relocation to Rapture, he found the criticism of institutions above far too wrong, too oblivious to the artistic genius Cohen saw himself as, and he thought like a kickback from Ryan after being in his pocket and making propagandic music for him. Cohen's obsession to create none but the best drew him to insanity, opting to take advantage of the corpses that frequently littered Rapture, and later splicing to create his own. That last bit's just a little theory I have on why he has a Houdini splicer's magic attacks. Cohen's evident insanity leads him to existential dread, and this is shown brilliantly through one audio log, The Wild Bunny. In this log, we see Cohen telling a poem about a bunny who cannot take the ears off, forced to hop, and doomed to the ears. These ears could refer to Cohen's ability to get rid of his perfectionism, always curse to create more. In-game, Cohen sees the player passing through Fleet Hall to continue their march towards Ryan's office, when Cohen cuts the player's comms to Atlas in favor of his own self, implanting him into the story, bringing you to him. We see Cohen exhibiting perfectionism out of the gate, seemingly exploding a student over a failure to perfectly construct a musical piece from a piano, or perfect Cohen standards at least. As he guides the player further into the Fleet Hall, Cohen wants you to feast your eyes on his craft, a display featuring bodies posed to stack on top of each other, but alas, he finds it unperfect. And in need of assistance to create the work, Cohen enlists the player to hunt previous proteges of Cohen's and adorn pictures of the corpses across the quadtic, where Cohen sees his life work completed, his masterpiece achieved. This does not rid him of insanity, nor artistic presence, as later the player sees Cohen in Olympus Heights apartments, who attacks the player for disturbing his craft, using his magic attacks. Now, all this talk of Adam, but where does it come from? Dr. Bridget Tenenbaum is a German scientist who began a prodigal work under the Nazis. Not a great look, but she didn't seem too entirely keen on phrenology presented by the Nazis themselves. Rather more interested in actual genetics. This would lead her to Rapture to pursue her scientific studies with funding from Fontaine's smuggling ring, as Fontaine believes Tenenbaum's research would lead to great profit. Tenenbaum would later see a smuggler whose arm was previously crippled for more service, unloading barges like it had never happened, and after inquiring about the sudden change, had found the cause to be a sea slug. Tenenbaum's whole view shifted to the sea slug and later Adam, a miracle drug that quickly spread all over Rapture thanks to Fontaine and his smuggling ring. This is a perfectionist's dream. One didn't come without its cost, as the sea slug needed a host for mass production, and those hosts were provided by Fontaine. Little sisters. Small children whose stomachs were implanted with sea slugs and turned into living atom-producing factories. Tenenbaum, initially perfectly on board with this, possibly due to the exposure of Nazis' unethical experimentation on prisoners, started to veer away from the idea of using little children as machines, citing her maternal instinct. In game, she helps the player cure the little sisters of their atom-fueled disfigurement by giving the player a special plasmid, not in hopes of redeeming herself, as she knows that won't happen, but rather in hopes that little sisters get to see the world and live a life worth living. This is an example of perfectionism cured, of morals not being skewed but rather repaired. Tenenbaum inherited her perfectionism from her Nazi past, as well as her morals, doing whatever in the means of progress. Granted, Tenenbaum's progress is a lot less pseudo, more science than the Nazis, but was cured after opening her eyes to the atrocities she committed. Possibly the closest thing to a good ending anyone I talk about here gets. The setting as a whole is almost a metaphor for perfectionism, being Rapture. Rapture was intended to be a utopia, this perfect place where anyone could escape the litany of rulings of above, whether it be capitalism, communism, theocracy. It was made to be a true perfect escape. However, Andrew Ryan had placed several bans on items such as alcohol, drugs, and religious texts, leading to a huge smuggling ring headed by Frank Fontaine, leading to a second power rising to the top. Ryan had tried his best to stop this rapid balancing of power by placing death penalties for smugglers, but this didn't mean much in the long run as top officers just quit after finding these punishments too harsh, and with Fontaine in control of Rapture's atom supply, Ryan could feel his crown slipping. The perfect utopia crumbled between Ryan's fingers and into Fontaine's mouth, with Adam running rampant and Ryan having no control over it. All he could do was hole up in his office and watch it fall. Now, every example I've covered shows one thing. Perfectionism is doomed to fail. Whether it insanity claims you, as with this diamond, your project is completed, yet it seems like not enough, as we see this Cohen, your morals get in the way with Tenenbaum, or your scope is simply too grand with Ryan. Nothing will ever be perfect. And that's okay. Overall, Bioshock is some of the most potent examples of perfectionism ruining the perfectionist, and works as a cautionary tale. To leave off on one note, just know, do your best, even if your best is imperfect. Good night.